G'day and welcome to the 11th episode of The Wrap. My name's Alexander Cameron. With me today are two of the biggest amateur sports analysts, conspiracy theory pundits, real news advocates, sports and culture aficionados. My two brothers. How you going? Andy, how are you going first, mate?
Doing swell, mate. Doing very well. Happy to be here. Ready to get into it.
Dukes, how are you going, mate?
Mate, I'm pretty happy. I won the game of Risk last night between the boys after Parramatta got a big victory, 52-6, I believe.
51
over the Tigers. So it's been good for me, particularly since I won Monopoly and Texas Hold'em. I'm on a roll, taking your money.
Dukes is doing well recently in the board game and general game-related stakes. So I thought we'd give a quick little intro about what we like to do here on The Wrap. So what we like to do here on The Wrap is give kind of a quick synopsis, if we can, keep it under an hour, summary of the news of the week that has been. Okay, so that's kind of, and the way that we like to do that is we like to do a domestic story, so a focus particularly on Australian politics, but not exclusively. International story. And also we like to do everyone's favourite segment as well, which relates to Beta Male of the Week. Andy, what is the Beta Male of the Week and what are we trying to do on that segment?
Okay, so the Beta Male of the Week is someone who doesn't take responsibility for their own actions, someone who we think, well, not even someone, it can be an entity, it can be a group of people, it can be a female as well. So we're open with our labels. Someone who doesn't take responsibility for their actions, someone who we think is really a bit of a grub, not really someone we think anyone should aspire to be like. That's how I would describe the beta male to someone.
Dukes, would you add or redact any of what Andy said?
No, I think it's okay and we can run with that for the episode.
Okay, cool. So what we're going to do, we're going to kick it off with our domestic story.
I think you're missing a big segment.
That's exactly right. Andos, thank you for being Johnny on the spot. What we'd like to do as well here, we like to do a lot of things, as you can probably imagine, but what we'd like to do is a segment called Jumping to Conclusions. And the idea of this is to pay homage to all the girlfriends out there and all the wives who like to jump to conclusions without justifying things. So we like to do that on this program, get everyone touching the ball, so to speak, get it through the hands and out to the winger. So what we're going to do is Andy, Dukes and I are going to say something that's a little bit ridiculous, a little bit outlandish, and then at the end we're going to decide who has to justify it, who's got to substantiate the allegation, so to speak. So Andos, why don't you kick it off? What's yours for this week, mate?
Mine is that Australian hip-hop has only produced two great acts, being Hilltop Hoods and Cursor.
It's a bit of disrespect to Bliss and Esso.
Look, they
disrespect to 360 and Pairs.
They're in my thoughts, but I think the Pantheon. There's only two great ones. But
in the Pantheon on the Mount Rushmore of Australian hip hop.
What about Iggy Azalea?
We're gonna have to ask him to justify it. Okay, that's reasonably interesting, particularly since our last interview, which will be going up very, very shortly. Dukes, what's yours?
My conclusion is that at every Australian primary school, kids should be learning Chinese. Should be a compulsory subject.
So you're selling us out.
Okay, all right, that's an interesting one. I'm going to say this one. All cyclists should have to have a number plate on the back of the bike.
I just don't really know what that achieves.
Well, you're going to have to ask. Because at the minute, my claim is that you're responsible for your car in as much as you can actually be identified. And I would say that cyclists are just as almost in quite a few cases are just as responsible for their own accidents and for what happens to them as the car. I think we have this protected species approach towards cyclists, which I think is a little bit unreasonable considering that they're operating a tiny little frame on a main road. So I think there should be a means by which we could get to these guys.
At the same time, it's the exact same it's even more protected for pedestrians.
Pedestrians should have to wear number plates.
Who equally would be as much responsible for their own accidents on roads as cyclists. But Let's go to a vote. Dudes, what do you think?
Okay, I'm happy to nominate Andy just because he's wrong.
That seems to be.
I'm also happy to nominate Andy because I like to see him square.
Okay. Moving swiftly on. What's the first story, Alex?
Watergate. And it's not the original Watergate. It's the sequel. They always say the sequel disappoints, but we're going to find out. We're going to wait and see. So, on April 18th, so about a week ago,
About
5 days ago, Channel 10, highly rated current affairs show, The Project, it had a 10-minute investigation into strategic water purchases in the Murray-Darling Basin. In particular, the report focused on a $79 million purchase in the Condamine-Balone catchment in Queensland, which had been signed off by then Water Minister Barnaby Joyce, everyone's favourite, man of the people, the homeboy Barnaby. So what has happened is this has also implicated another Liberal MP, Angus Taylor. So basically, to give a little bit of background to the
Barnaby's
story.
a Nationals MP, mate.
Barnaby's Nats, yes. I believe Angus Taylor's in the Libs, isn't he?
Yes.
Is he not?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for that, Dukes.
He just had another Liberal MP, but it's just a singular Liberal.
Okay, alright. Basically, what happened was Angus Taylor, in his role as a management consultant, as part of being in investment banking, gave advice and established, didn't establish, but he became part of a company, two companies that were domiciled in the Cayman Islands. Now, of course, as soon as you hear Cayman Islands, people think tax haven, and that's exactly right, because that was obviously what it was for. About 10,200 companies each year get created and domiciled in the Cayman Islands. So that's quite interesting. So Angus Taylor becomes the director and company secretary of these two companies, and he organises the financing for the purchasing of two properties within the space of a couple of weeks in 2008 for 31 million and 66 million respectively. Okay, so then this was all a part of the play by a bunch of companies who were trying to capitalise on what the Howard's water plan, and the idea was that as part of this $10 billion national water plan, there would be about $3 billion for water buybacks, because many irrigators and people who are reliant on water, particularly in rural areas, were doing it tough. Okay, they weren't getting the water that they needed, so Howard said, okay, the government's going to buy back the water in many of these parts and try and do it a little bit more cheaply to spread the love, so to speak. Now, the problem was that for Angus Taylor and his mates who were organising the acquisition of these properties for the purpose of the National Water Plan, is that their buybacks were unbelievably slow. So that happened in 2007 and 2008. It was not until 2015 that Barnaby Joyce, when he became the Minister for Water, signed off on an $80 million deal to the companies that Angus Taylor had previously been associated with. So it was about 7 years later. At that point, Angus Taylor has had no direct financial interest in the sale. However, this has become a story because it's also become a story about value for money. So we've got to recognise the fact, my favourite saying, that there was no tender process, so there was no means by which different parties could bid or could organise some kind of proposal to the government. Barnaby just kind of went out there and bought these two water and irrigation licences for a total of 79 million, which has caused a bit of a stink, because this was also it's kind of the same principle as when Malcolm Turnbull gave 500 million to the Great Barrier Reef Society or whatever it was, without a tender process either. So whenever there's a lack of a tender process, things tend to kick up a bit of a stink. So that was in 2015, but the deal got done, finalised in 2017. Now, the documents showed that the company initially wanted 2,200 per megalitre, but during negotiations it rose to 2,750. So again, when you see the process by which they're negotiating the deal and the price goes up, people start getting a little bit antsy. So this 79 million was part of the total 200 million which Barnaby Joyce siphoned from the taxpayers as part of this plan for water buyback. So it didn't constitute the entirety of the water buybacks, but it constituted about 40%. So the details of the stories are still coming out as to what actually the ability for the government to move the water from off the property as well, because it becomes a little bit of a logistics issue. Even if you buy the water at the price, the ability to move it logistically at a price which is effective is obviously still another issue in and of itself. And because they hadn't actually bought it yet, we're kind of still waiting to see if it would work. So Labor is calling for a royal commission into this. They're saying that if Bill gets in the House, they're going to come down with the hammer on this, and anyone associated with this deal, if there's shown to be any dodgy dealings, they're gonna smack him down. So if Bill gets in the lodge, Angus Taylor's going to be on the block. Labor has given Scott Morrison until Monday to address questions about the 2017 water buybacks and has not ruled out establishing a royal commission. Sarah Hanson-Young calling for a royal commission. A spokesperson for Angus Taylor has come out and said allegations currently online that link Minister Taylor with EAA's sale of water entitlements are incorrect. Minister Taylor has not had any direct or indirect financial interest in EAA or its parent company at the time. So that was the company that owned the water licenses. So this is a story about potential corruption, about mates buying stuff off other mates. Dukes, what's your reaction?
Sharing the money going around, the money
taxpayer
flowing.
money.
Look, it's hard when the details are still coming out, but that in itself is a pretty poor reflection on Barnaby and Taylor, that they haven't been the ones to clear up the details so far. This is a pretty big story. Barnaby did an interview on ABC, which pretty much left more questions than provided answers in the minds of most people. And we still don't really have any idea about, there's a lot of speculation going on, and the speculation would be a lot less if either of the two parties involved would be able to shed some light on something of which they were obviously involved. Now, whether there was any dirty dealing, as we like to say, we don't know yet. You might be skeptical. I'm probably skeptical, but it is a bad look when they haven't come out and fully addressed it. It would be easy to do, just call a quick media meeting, just give a 10-15 minute spiel on everything that's happened, who benefited from what exactly your role was in the operation, and why it is that we bought such an expensive thing on the taxpayer funds without the tender, without that needs an explanation regardless.
Right.
And so at best it's just been a bit silly for the past few days from the Libs and the Nads, and at worst there might be a bit of corruption involved.
Yeah.
And have you got anything to say?
Not really. I just don't think we should go completely into this hysteria of headhunting and talks of royal commissions until we figured out what's actually going on completely. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have much.
It's probably what the royal commission would be for, but
yeah, but
I know what you mean.
It's okay. It's okay, mate. It's okay.
Okay, I think that we're trying to make these a bit more quick.
I'll give my 30, 45 seconds because I don't really get any analysis
you go quickly.
All I would say is that this is one of the problems you have when the government intervenes in the market. Is we talk about negative externalities and we talk about the harmful byproducts of capitalism and the free market. But I would say one of the potential detriments of when the government does get involved is that because it's not really based on free market principles or its price, supply, demand, it's more about government doing favours for their mates. And this is what happens. The more government intervention you see, normally the more ministers that amass huge amounts of wealth and and money, basically, is what happens. But I would say this. I don't think this is a story. It looks like Angus Taylor had when the properties were sold and the licenses were sold. It looks like Angus Taylor and his friends/family had no actual beneficial financial interest in the arrangement, in the deal. And the fact that he was kind of well clear of that by the time he got into politics, I think is a good thing overall. I think it's been sloppily handled, and it looks. I think it looks worse. The optics are worse than the reality. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Very cool.
Our international story for the week is a big one, and it's the Sri Lanka terrorist attack. It's a terribly sad story. There's victims from at least 12 countries, and I think there is. I've just left out the main. Okay, so they've killed 290 people at least, almost 300, and I think there's another 500 injured. There was a wave of bombings across Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday. Prime Minister Scott Morrison confirmed 2 Australians were tragically killed in the massacre. There were thought to be 6 suicide bombers involved in the explosions. And it's a terribly sad story. And there's not a lot of the actual substance of the story that happened to be covered, other than to say it's a terrible tragedy. But in light of how Western countries dealt with Christchurch, I think it's important to maybe have a little analysis of the two. And we understand that both were terrible terrorist attacks. The death toll is a bit higher in the Sri Lankan terror attack. We understand that Sri Lanka is 70% Buddhist, 12% Hindu, 10% Muslim, and 7% Christian. And I want us to have a look at the responses from Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton on the Christchurch massacre, and then compare it to the Sri Lanka, the Sri Lanka attack. Hillary, okay, so Barack said on the New Zealand attack, he tweeted, "Michelle and I send our condolences to the people of New Zealand. We grieve with you and the Muslim community. All of us must stand against hatred in all its forms." Barack Obama then said about the Sri Lanka attack that the attacks on tourists and Easter worshippers in Sri Lanka are an attack on our humanity. On a day devoted to love, redemption and renewal, we pray for the victims, stand with the people of Sri Lanka. Okay. Hillary Clinton said, in relation to New Zealand, "My heart breaks for New Zealand and the global Muslim community. We must continue to fight perpetuation and normalisation of Islamophobia and racism in all its forms. White supremacist terrorists must be condemned by leaders everywhere. Their murderous hatred must be stopped." Hillary then said about Sri Lanka, "On this holy weekend for many faiths, we must stand united against hatred and violence. I'm praying everyone affected by today's horrific attacks on Easter worshippers and travellers in Sri Lanka." So the important points to understand is that Barack Obama both identified that Muslims were the group who were attacked in Christchurch, but neither recognised that it was Christians who were attacked in Sri Lanka. They referred to them as Easter worshippers, and I don't know what the hell Easter worshippers are, and I don't think they do either. They also said travellers, but let me tell you, it's a Christian holiday, regardless of the fact that Hillary tells us the Easter weekend is a holy time for many faiths. I don't know which other faith does Easter besides Christianity, because I know the Jews don't. I doubt the Hindus or Buddhists or Muslims do, because they don't believe in Jesus.
Maybe the Scientologists, but I haven't spoken to Tom Cruise.
And the way Hillary condemns, listen to what she says again: "We must continue to fight the perpetuation and normalisation of Islamophobia and racism in all its forms. White supremacist terrorists must be condemned by leaders everywhere. Their murderous hatred must be stopped." And all Hillary says is we must stand united against hatred and violence in regard to the Sri Lanka terrorist attack. So what I want us to understand from this is that regardless of the media narrative, obviously there are a range of circumstances in which Muslims are attacked on their faith, which I don't like and I condemn, and I wish it wouldn't happen. But the fact of the matter is, when you get down to the actual numbers, there are terror attacks and hate crimes against Christians all the time in the world, and if you actually look at the research data, Christians are the most oppressed religious group in the world because of the way Muslim majority countries treat Christians, okay? Christian majority countries, mainly in the West, treat Muslims much better than Christians get treated in Muslim countries. But it doesn't fit in the narrative, so Hillary and Barack and the mainstream media won't tell you about it like that. Instead, they'll take white nationalism to town, and for good reason. But it's like they only have one half of the scale there. Even if it's probably not even half, right? And if you look around the world, there's not that many white terrorist attacks going on. There have been significant ones like Christchurch. There have been that one in Norway, like maybe 15 years ago or however many. But when you look across Africa and across the Middle East, terror attacks on Christians, but also on other Muslims committed by Muslims, and to then come out and talk about the hate specifically coming out of the Christian religion without then acknowledging it also coming out of the Muslim religion, even though you should be probably condemning Islam to a greater degree considering it's the crocodile closest to our boat. It demonstrates a bias, it demonstrates fake news, and just for the listeners out there, as much as CNN and New York Times will put out false headlines, they'll say things that are patently false. Probably the larger part of fake news is actually those stories which you choose not to cover. Those parts of the narrative you choose to leave blank because they don't fit it. And so I regard this as fake news. I regard this as dangerous. And this is the reason why people are very distrustful of the media.
I think your analysis was pretty good there, Duke. So I'd also say that if we go back to the same week of Christchurch, there were about 120 Christians in Nigeria which got systematically butchered over a weekend. Not a single news media outlet really gave it any type of credence at all. Now, I understand that it is a proximity issue with this as well, is that New Zealand is much closer to us than, say, Nigeria or Sri Lanka. That we feel probably more tied to New Zealand in terms of our history and culture, but it does not excuse the fact that there is a deliberate and serious attempt to skew the narrative in such a way that demonises Christians and white people altogether, and which puts the followers of Islam and Muslims in a boat which is occupied only by themselves. You're absolutely right when you talk about the way in which Christians are treated in majority Muslim countries, but I would say that the Christians are just kind of part of the large group of people, non-Muslims, who get treated poorly in Muslim countries anyway. You look at the way in which India, Bangladesh and Pakistan all separated from each other along lines of faith, with Pakistan constituting kind of the Muslim element of that breakup. There were situations in which trains would go back and forth between India and Pakistan, and there would just be Buddhists and Muslims just shooting trains full of people. So I think that's not to say that that Islam and Buddhism are on the same level in terms of this type of stuff, but you're right when you also talk about the fact that the vast majority of the victims of Islamic violence are Muslims, and you see that in the way in which there are relations between majority Muslim countries in the Middle East. That on a macro level is absolutely apparent. the question I'm kind of struggling with on this topic is what is the actual end game with this? What is the end game with this type of language where they set the narrative so that Christians and white people in general are the ones who are the oppressor, and Muslims and the followers of Islam are the oppressed? I'm not exactly sure what the end game is. I don't know, because it's obvious.
I'll probably make a longer video on this, but I think I have a pretty good answer, and it's the critical theory that came out of the what's that damn school called in Germany? Anyway, regardless, there was a few Marxists in like 1940 who came to late 1930s who came to America, Jewish guys. The Frankfurt School. This is the Frankfurt School. Who realised, in 1938 they came from Germany to America because that's the only place that would have them, because anti-Semitism was rife in Germany, and it was also significant across other places in Europe. And so then they decided, they came to America as Marxists, and once they realised in about the 1960s, after the Hungarian uprising in 1956, where the Soviet Union slaughtered a lot of Hungarians who didn't want to be a part of the Soviet Union, and also about how the working class in the West was doing so well, they realised that capitalism was here to stay, or at least that the working class against bourgeois oppressor-oppressed narrative wasn't going to work, right? So then they felt like, well, the way to actually overthrow capitalism and the system we live in is to replace the working class bourgeois against the with the identity politics we have today, where it's not just working class, it's about the identities, the skin colour, the sexualities, the gender, blah blah blah. And so really, as far as I can tell, it's an attempt to take down the society we live in. But nonetheless, that's a topic for another day where we can go in depth. I just think that we're going to probably go off on a train and get lost here, and it's going to go for too long. And so I reckon we leave that one there.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, the only thing I would add to that is I have heard similar arguments, but I have basically that the real kind of hardcore economic Marxism failed. But it was also someone, I think Jordan Peterson might have mentioned the idea of the French postmodernists who managed to infiltrate the American universities in particular,
it's Foucault and Derrida are big players in it, but it's originally Horkheimer and the guys from the Frankfurt School who first came with the critical theory. Okay, so we're going to do the final story, which is Andos is going to take the lead on, so why don't you quickly run us through that?
I think Hillary and Barack both get beta male nominations.
Yeah, they get beta male nominations. Oh, and yeah, Andy, you take the reins, brother.
So, big news, I think it would have been about a week ago, where the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris went up in flames. We don't actually know the cause yet. That was probably going to take a while to figure out, but what's currently being thought as a electrical short circuit, either caused by the temporary elevators used while renovating or a computer glitch, created the fire that sent the cathedral up in flames. So firstly, there's been a lot of debate over the funding, especially Australia's role in the funding. And we see Malcolm Turnbull, ex-Prime Minister, jumping on the bandwagon straight away.
Globalist bandwagon.
Yeah, tweeted out that we should have that a fund should be set up and Australia should donate to it. And we saw Josh Frydenberg, the Treasurer, agreed to it. They thought it would be a good idea. Bill Shorten said that we must do it. That it's a very good idea because he said, I'm paraphrasing, that Notre Dame doesn't just belong to France, it belongs to the world.
Yeah.
And ScoMo shut it down. ScoMo said that...
Good work, ScoMo. People don't voluntarily pay taxes in this country. That they get forced to pay taxes, although some may be willing to anyway, regardless of if they had a choice or not. But it's money that's taken from people, and to spend it in a different country, which is quite a wealthy country, without the consent of the people is a bit rude, especially considering the fact that a lot of Australians probably have never been there, don't care about the cathedral that much. It's because they're different faiths. There's some Chinese Buddhists, we've got some Hindus in here, we've got some Muslims. We don't need to make them, like, we wouldn't be going to pay for the rebuild of Mecca. Why don't, well, you can if you want, just don't force anyone to.
Well, Bill Shorten alluded to his time backpacking, and he said that when he was backpacking, one of his greatest, well, I'm not sure if it was an achievement, but one of the greatest things that happened was that he went to Notre Dame. And he said that because of this history that we all share and that we've all been touched by it, then we should donate.
No,
This is why they call him. This is why they call him Teflon built, right? Because he's not made of anything, and he's always got a story for the moment, doesn't he? About this one time back in band camp when we went to Notre Dame. Absolute ridiculousness. And Dukes is right when he talks about this idea that all of a sudden the government, that people when they go into the public sector and the government go through this transformation process where they become meta-humans, where they become better moral arbiters over the money spent. This is why I don't think government should really be spending money on charities, because if the people really want to spend that money on charity, then they'll do it themselves. So you shouldn't tax people so that you can use their money to pay for what you feel like is a worthy cause. I don't think in general it's good practice. This is inevitably, I'm sure that if we do send money over to Notre Dame, it'll end up in the hands of the people distributing it, the UN most likely, which will, they'll pay for a nice big conference where they fly everyone in private jets and all that type of stuff. Good ScoMo, you've gone up 10 points in my opinion, and you know what?
Freiburg's gone down. Freiburg.
Yeah, Freiburg is a little bit of a globalist, but I think definitely good ScoMo, and this is a good point so that he can differentiate himself from Shorten. I think it's smart politics, but it's good job overall. But he's going to say, well, Shorten, you don't care about Australians.
There is an elephant in the room on this story, which is the fact that the cathedral is just a damn building. I would much rather see the money go to investing in people rather than a church, I have to say.
Well, sorry to cut you off, but that was the second sort of tangent I was going to go into on this story. Donations at the moment, especially from wealthy French citizens and corporations, have raised over $1.5 billion.
Surely that's got to cover it.
Well, you'd hope so. No,
you don't think so. What type of building costs more than €1.5 billion to repair?
Who knows? But
it's just the spire. The inside wasn't damaged.
I think the roof as well was damaged. But
damn expensive roof.
Henry
made out of panda bones.
Yeah, man. Baby first ornaments.
So there has actually been. So all the donations flowed in. Everyone that sort of jumped on saying, "I'll donate some. I'll do it." Like in South Park where they go, "I flooded the dam." No, I flooded the dam. A lot like that. But then there was a whole lot of backlash, especially in regard to the Yellow Vest movement. That was one sort of area of backlash in which they were told there's not enough money to spend on social inequalities. You're just going to have to...
well, they said we don't have enough money to cover the fact that we're just going to hike up another gas tax because we think we're going to contribute to global warming. And then everyone goes, I can't afford petrol prices this high.
Yeah.
But we're going to put a whole bunch of money towards Notre Dame.
Yeah, so that's one area.
It's a damn building. The Catholic Church is like the richest thing in the world. Look at the damn scepters they got walking around. I'm sure they got enough gold in the I'm sure they got enough gold in the damn Vatican that Smell wants to go and get it.
Look. I'm open to the idea that it's more than a building. I appreciate the fact. I think it is kind of culturally significant, whatever. I just don't think it should be taxpayer money.
Okay, well, here's my thing, and I saw a good point about the culturally significant argument. If it is in fact culturally significant, we haven't had, a problem in the past cutting down trees, which are very special to Aboriginal people, but all of a sudden we kick up a stink when we knock down a building the building gets burned down, which is special to us. So if your argument is that, well, this building is very important, and in the same way, you can't say you can't knock over any Aboriginal trees.
I don't know about that one.
Mate, the trees have been around longer than the cathedral has.
Sure. Sure.
And the Aboriginals probably have a better connection to the tree than we do to the cathedral.
Do you reckon they would remember each and every tree?
What?
Well, I mean, Notre Dame is a unique building. Do you reckon? And it's fairly identifiable.
Well, it's
they would-
obviously identifiable to Aboriginal people, the trees.
I think.
Or the birthing trees, I think. I'm
I
not
don't
sure if it's
think-
IR or ER.
I don't think you get to talk on behalf of Aboriginal people.
Well, I'm just saying I saw it, and if I saw an argument about it, and I think if we're going to kick up a stink about how culturally significant this thing is to us, then we should also extend that culturally significant argument to Aboriginal people.
Yeah, but there's a difference between. I don't want the government to step in on this. Okay, I don't. I think it should just be privately funded. Okay, I'm not saying the government needs to step in, but if your argument is that it's culturally significant, so the government should step in on trees, then I think everyone should get to identify one thing that they like, and the government has to maintain it.
Sure, but I'm just saying that that the Aboriginal argument breaks down the culturally significant argument.
But I would also there's plenty of different Aboriginal cultures within Aboriginality as well. It's not as if it was one unified culture.
Well, so it's the same as Australia and the West, we have a lot of different cultures
Sure,
that don't all identify with the Notre Dame Cathedral.
that's fine. I'm not saying that the government has to pay for it, but I'm saying if you're
I
arguing,
didn't understand you said there's some argument about it's more than just a building, and I didn't understand the inferences you're trying to make.
well, when you were saying that it's just a building, I was saying it's not really just a building.
It really is just a building. I mean, it's just, in terms of like the ballpark areas, you have like people up here, way up in the clouds, and then down here you have buildings. And maybe like Notre Dame is like a treetop level building because it might be slightly higher than just average building, but it's nowhere compared to people.
Okay, but I would say like if the Harbour Bridge burnt down, people would be. I don't think the Harbour Bridge is just a bridge.
It is.
Well,
it is just a bridge.
It's an interesting argument, but also there has been some other discussion in which other monuments or buildings have burnt down in other countries and did not receive nearly as much attention. So when we're talking about the significance of certain buildings and like which ones are more important than the others on the basis of like cultural significance, churches in Louisiana, Brazilian National Museum, and ones in the Middle East that have been burnt down by IS. There's been a lot of discussion about why they didn't get this attention, and a lot of it people are suggesting that it's as a result of white privilege. That's
Oh look, I think there's. I wouldn't say it's white privilege. I would say it's looking after yourself, or looking after batting for your own team, and it happens in the West, which 200 years ago was mostly white people in the countries. They made the best systems, which made everybody rich. 200 years later, and so when they feel like they need to go out into bat for their own team, then they're the ones with the money.
I think that's fair.
But I do think there is definitely a level of hypocrisy if anyone is demanding government funding for that and not for the other ones.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. I don't think we should be spending money on it. Okay, but I just don't think you can say it's just a building.
Okay, well then you can't say to any Aboriginal trees it's just a tree, and you shouldn't be able to knock it down then.
Well, there's a difference between knock it down and just because it's culturally significant doesn't mean you can't make modifications.
Like cut it out.
Yeah.
It's an interesting modification.
I think there is a distinction here in that it would be that if the Aboriginal trees got burnt down in a big forest fire, do we have an obligation to give them the money to pay it back to build the trees again? Should we give them the seeds? I think it would be a better analogy. I think there is the practicality, the pragmatism in regard to that argument is.
I'm just not sure why. I'm not saying taxpayer funding goes to it, but I'm saying you can still say it's culturally significant without having to acknowledge the fact that
government.
You just don't start knocking down trees.
Okay, so these birthing trees in I think Victoria, which apparently are culturally significant to Aboriginal people for thousands of years, are scheduled to get marked for removal along, I think because they're building a road there, on a Western Highway upgrade between Ballarat and Staywell in a jointly funded state and federal government project.
Stall. You should
Stall.
know that. Your grandma's right.
So, are you saying that we should be able to knock them down?
Well, I think whose property is it?
Well, I don't know whose property it is, but it's
Probably relevant piece of information.
but it is a culturally significant tree.
No, but also that would be if the French government wanted to build a super highway through Notre Dame. It would be a similar analogy.
Mm.
It's they're taking the cultural significance away as a result of.
Okay, but what I'm actually saying is that we're getting all hyped up about how culturally significant this building is, but we give very little airtime to how culturally significant things are for, like, Aboriginal culture, for instance.
Well, I think that's a numbers game as well. There's
You don't think that what I just said was true?
yeah, but I'm trying to give you a reason why. But my argument is not that the government should pay for Notre Dame. Okay, but you say when your point of comparison is that the government should come in and make sure that there's no
I didn't say that.
modifications of birthing trees.
I didn't say that.
You said
And
if
they're not
you're-
modifications if you cut them down. That's not a modification.
Okay, you can't cut down birthing trees if you believe that
I'm just saying that's
Notre Dame is culturally significant. You can believe Notre Dame is culturally significant without saying that it's that the government should come in and pay for its.
Yeah, I'm not arguing against you. But also I will argue against your application of the word modification, because I don't think you can modify a tree by. I don't think it's a fair way to describe a cutting down of a tree.
Well, you
as a
can pick it up
modification.
and replant
You
it.
can transform the tree into a road.
You can do
As a modification.
transform it. Okay, I think that argument's not going anywhere. So we're going to finish up. We've had a few Beta Male nominations. Malcolm Turnbull, Frydenberg, Shorten got one for that's a combo nom for
Notre Dame. That's a.
Notre Dame
Notre Dame.
Help Fund. I'm going to give one. This is one we should have done last week, but you guys know we've been covering the Avi Yemeni story. He was going to America for a press tour. The FBI held him up in the airport and sent him back to Australia without letting him do any press for no reason. So FBI is getting a Beta Male nom from me.
Well, the FBI is straight racist. Sydney. I'll say it. Sydney Watson reckons that it was because they thought he was a terrorist. That's what she said.
Because he does look, he's Jewish, but he does look a bit like a Muslim. And well, he's got that skin colour, and he's young. He's pretty fit. He's got that little black beard. Like they do identify people that look like that at the airport and screen them. It's all people that look like Muslims that get the random screening.
Yeah, sure.
It's not very random.
It's not very random.
But I guarantee that someone at because the thing is, this whole late night comedy setup is really just a function of the deep state. That's what it is. That's how they control, because they're losing the battle with the news. What they've done is they've gone all in on these late night show hosts, right? And they're really pumping that with that kind of left wing propaganda, this cultural Marxism. And I guarantee you that it was not a run of the mill. Oh, we think this guy might be suspicious. He's Jewish. That call came from the top brass. That one.
Yeah. Well, regardless, he would be a man who would get randomly checked all the time.
Yeah, but I don't think I don't think he had any gear on him.
I don't think that.
Well, I'm not saying. Look. Okay. Now he was able to do his press tour over Skype a lot of the times. He went on Infowars. He went on Dave Rubin's show. Go look him up, Avi Yemeni, and go look up those interviews. Do we have any other noms? Obviously, Hillary and Obama get one for their terrible coverage of Sri Lanka.
It's just so suspicious to me that they use the same language, that there must have been some kind of information that went out that just said, when regarding this attack, you don't refer to them as Christians.
Or
You
maybe
refer to
they're
them as
running.
It's kind of bizarre. Don't you think? I like, people aren't making a big enough stink about
And
this. Like,
nobody's ever used the term Easter worshippers
yeah,
before.
it's just
a
so
new term.
peculiar, and it's part of what they do is they like to shift the language so that things don't mean the same anymore. It's
Yeah.
like a Christian becomes an Easter worshipper, which just means someone who turns up on Easter Sunday and goes to church. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It has no relation to the faith itself. It's bizarre. It's kind of confronting, and we should be doing more investigative
We could make a
journalism
video
into-
on like a Gavin McInnes updated words that aren't the same anymore.
Yeah. Watch out for the way they do this, because this is how it's a gradual seeping into the fabric of society.
Okay, so who are we going to give it to?
There's not really a strong someone who's really taken the baton.
They're all.
You know what? I want to give it to the FBI, because the FBI stopped Avi. He hadn't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
He was going to do a tour to redeem his name after the hit piece of fake news, and they stopped him from doing it. Thought this was a miracle.
I thought this was a miracle.
So they get the.
You're going to give it to FBI. I'm going to give it to Obama and Clinton.
Oh, it's those I have to make a decision.
Clinton was worse than Obama.
Yeah, but to kind of reduce the severity of if someone said like in reference to Christchurch, it happened to a bunch of people who were just on mats facing Mecca, for example. It just reduced their faith to something that they did, like an action.
The prayer mat worshippers.
If you just said, the prayer mat Mecca facing worshippers, everyone would be like, no, they're Muslims. But it's the deep state out again, Barack and Hillary.
Okay, I'm happy to change to Barack and Hillary if you want.
Yeah, I think we can...
okay, Barack and Hillary, get it. Now,
the fallen Messiah.
Finish up. Andy.
Yes.
Justify
so
yourself.
my conclusion was that the only two great products of Australian hip hop were Cursor and Hilltop Hoods. I'm going to keep this sort of quite succinct in saying that I think I value longevity and consistency more than you two. Durability in the rap game, I think, is something that is integral to greatness.
What about Tupac and Biggie?
They were, yeah.
They weren't alive for that long.
They're
the two greatest rappers of all time weren't alive for that long, and you saying that longevity is the key to being an all-star.
But Andy would rate Blue Gun Bleedums on top of Tupac and Biggie. So I don't think Andy even puts Tupac and Biggie in the pantheon.
Andy, how about all the all-time great singers who all died when they were like 27?
Well, their body of work is justified.
What about Janet Jackson?
Do you want to let me
Michael
explain?
Jackson?
Do you want to let me explain my point before?
Yeah. Explain it.
Okay. Bliss and Esso is a group that I thought would. I was very much on the line whether they would get into it, but I think that. Can you name me one song other than Moments in the past 5 years that Bliss and Esso have put out? They should.
But we're talking about all time. We're not talking about current.
There are two great products of Australian hip hop. Bliss, there was a golden age, I would say, but I don't think the strongest survived from that golden age of Australian hip hop, in which.
What about JUF?
Is your argument that they have to continue writing music till they're 50?
No, my argument is that
because Bliss and Esso, if they were still recording, they would be.
They
about 50.
are still recording, but there's not very they're not really putting that much out, and they're not really doing much.
So, what are you saying about Park and Biggie?
I'm saying that Park and Biggie...
Because they got shot suck.
No, I'm saying they are probably the two greatest of all time.
You got parked, bruh.
I'd say they're pretty close to the GOATs. I think their body of work is justified and immortalised. Probably too much. I think it is glorified too much because they were tragically shot and killed. But I think that Bliss and Esso have got 3 really, really, really good songs.
Do you reckon Iggy Azalea is better than Biggie?
I think
who's better, Iggy or
what
Biggie?
I was saying is that you guys don't I think longevity is something that definitely contributes greatly to greatness, and I think I value that more than you two. And I think it's a big part of the conversation when you're talking about greatness.
Okay, all right, you've heard it from the horse's mouth.
Jesus of Nazareth only did it 3 years, pretty much 30 to 33. He's all time.
He was the GOAT since he was born, bruh.
30 to 33, just.
All right, now we got anything left? I think it's time to wrap this up. If you want to go support us, if you want us to help us buy a real Beta Male trophy where we can get name inscriptions. Also, we're hoping to get a couple of new camcorders. We're moving into hopefully a new podcast space soon. We want to get some new mics. We need to just upgrade our production quality all round.
But get Andy a gym membership.
And speech pathology lessons.
That's your new favourite phrase, isn't it? If you want to help us out, you don't have to, but we do need to fight the Clintons. Then you can go on our Patreon. Link is down below in the description. As little as $1 a month would go a long way. So we appreciate that. We appreciate all the patrons who have already started donating. That's been awesome. And we'll see you next week. Alex is going away. Alex is going to China for 6 months.
To the land of the rising sun for 6 months.
So he won't be on the wrap. Hopefully he'll be writing some articles, and he reckons he'll hopefully be able to take a camera, so you might be able to see some vlogs or some videos.
But it looks like it's just going to be me and you, dude.
Me and Andos holding down the fort. Hopefully we'll get a guest rotation on. It's something I've been working on. We bought a new light this week, actually. Should be coming on Friday, like studio lights, like softbox lights of Amazon.
Softbox, hotbox.
It hurt us to give that money to Jeff Bezos, the reptilian globalist, but we had to because he gave us a great price on these lights.
That's how he does it.
That's what we've been up to. Anyway, we'll see you guys later. Thanks for sticking with us.
Thanks for being with us.